Columbian Editorial Board is pleased to welcome Representative Marie Gluesenkamp Perez. Thank you for joining us. Have some brief time off from Washington, D.C. And so and as mentioned, we are recording this. We will post it unedited online for the benefit of our readers. I'm Greg Chain, the editorial page editor. I'll let the other editorial board members introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Colleen Keller. I'm the assistant news editor of the Columbian.
Will Campbell, editor. I'm Ben Campbell, publisher.
And then Craig Brown, the other member of the editorial board, is out of town. He's not able to join us today. But again, thank you for joining us. So real quick, we'll just start out with get your thoughts briefly, and then we'll move on to some specific policy questions. So moving forward, what are your priorities?
Continuing to reflect the values, the priorities of our district. I think it is an accelerating news cycle where there's just something new every day. And I think trying to keep your eyes on the horizon and focus on what is like what we really want to have at the end of the day, like what is really worth having. Those are more durable goals. I think the right to fix your own stuff, like the economic agency of the middle class, not just subsidizing the negative externalities of whatever you don't like, but saying, how do you build and hold generational wealth? We want people to be able to own the farmland they work on, diversifying land holdings, that kind of thing. So, the capital access, some of the, which, the right to repair stuff is, at its core, it's an antitrust issue. Things that build agency. So, shop class in junior high, like being able to have the skills to do the things and building a more level playing field in market entry. And, there are a lot of problems and a lot of, incredible resources in Southwest Washington. One of the kind of shorter term issues or more pressing issues here immediately is the reauthorization of SRS, secure rural schools. Yeah, this is really reaching a tipping point. It's been frustrating to me to kind of see these votes on renaming the Gulf of Mexico, and it's like, let's just have geography class. Let's know that we're going to be able to fund shop class in the fall. And trying to raise awareness, make our issues human scale to folks in DC.
And regarding the secure rural schools bill, what are the prospects for that? Are people in DC taking notice? Is it difficult to get attention?
It has been. I sometimes wonder if it's just an issue of like not having enough of my colleagues have children in public schools or in these places where SRS has been a necessity. I think.
What is the average age of the house?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's in the 70s. I think. To look, I know it's.
Because I know the Senate.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
But yeah, I think trying to find a way to attach it to something that's passed. I think, it's the cuts are, the payments are already delayed, and we've seen, they closed the Wind River Junior High Middle School in Skamania County. They've consolidated bus routes. They've fired paraeducators. There's been a lot of cutbacks, and that lack of certainty is just a terrible way to run a budget. So, trying to keep pressure up and just follow and bring it up at every opportunity.
With the seeming constant chaos in DC and in Congress, is it difficult to get people to focus on substantive issues like this?
Yeah, for a while it kind of felt like every time I try to bring up an issue with my colleagues on the And the majority would be like, well, we just need to get through the budget process first. We've got to get this bill passed. This is all of it. And it's like, this is one of the places where it feels like the goalpost is moved. Like passing a budget should not be, it should not be this partisan. It should not be this, much of a single issue. You know, I think we need to walk and chew gum and, you know, taking it feels like time is moving slowly in DC. We get into, there's a lot of just kind of reality TV-ification of, you know, committee hearings and just things like that. But there's also some encouraging things. There was a bill recently introduced out of House Natural Resource on NEPA reform, Speed Act. I was able to get some good amendments moved through the appropriations markups these past couple of months. So we'll jump right back into appropriation markups when I get back in September. So.
Okay, Colin?
Have you had, I know you have town halls scheduled. Have any of those taken place yet?
Tomorrow's my first one
Is your first?
this month. So I've had, I think 3 this year. No, 4 this year. So this month we'll do my 5th, 6th, and 7th town hall.
Okay.
And that'll bring us to, I think, 15 total, between last Congress and this Congress.
Okay, so I was just curious if there had been a difference. For some reason, I was thinking you had one last night, and obviously you did not. Because I'm wondering if there's a difference at all between the last couple of months, between what people were saying at those previous town halls and what they might be saying now. And what, do you have any idea what constituents is what's uppermost on their minds at this point in time?
Yeah, well, for I can tell you the volume of letters on the proposed public land sales that we saw come out of the Senate, that generated a lot of people were very concerned about that. And I'd kind of heard that was kind of dead before it started.
And to clarify, that is now dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was I think the senator driving that was just had no idea what that meant to
And that was Mike Lee of
Utah. Yeah. So, you know, I think we have like woods. You know, they have like Europe has cathedrals. You know, we have like that is really our national heritage and how we have a you know, natural resource economy and our determination, our ability to make the things that we use here. So I think that is an increasing risk. It's one of the reasons too that I was so let on the PFAS liability. You know, there's a concern about our public resources being auctioned off and sold to the highest bidder. PFAS issue, you know, our public utilities don't make money selling PFAS or forever chemicals. They're not the ones manufacturing these chemicals. They're the ones removing them from the water. And to open up some kind of potential where they're bankrupted by a lawsuit and sold to Nestle, that does not serve the public interest. I think that liability needs to stay with the manufacturer of the chemical who profited by making it and selling it, not the people who are taking it out of our public resources.
Are you thinking much yet about the midterms? You know, there's lots of noise out all around us about them, but you personally, are you thinking into next year yet, or are you just trying to get through this?
No, I mean, I feel a real strong duty to like be present and listening to my community right now. And, you know, I think it can be a distraction. I think that my hope is that my work stands for itself and staying focused on the task at hand and who I'm listening to and what kinds of bills I'm pushing and where my focus is at. really staying close to home. We have real problems at home, and you know, there's plenty of time to. It feels a little bit like when they start playing Christmas music in the grocery store right after Halloween. You know,
Yeah.
like, it's not my, you know, it's campaigning is not like, you know, like, that's not what I feel like is the highest use of my time.
How do you think that your standing is with Democratic organizations? You know, we've had like some officials from this region say like that your vote for the SAVE Act was unforgivable,
Mhm.
is the word they used.
Mhm.
Do you think your constituents feel that way too, or what is your take on that, the apparatchik, if you will, of?
Yeah, yeah, I can see, you know, when I used to pull cars in the shop a lot, it was like 8 out of 10 times the radio would be on a news station, and now it's, you know, 1 out of 10 maybe. Like people have really tuned out politics because it has become such a mudslinging. And so what the risk here is that people are so siloed, and they think that like they've got a algorithmically smoothed experience of the world, and they think that their neighbors are very married to their lens. And I think a lot of Americans have you know, they've walked away from politics, and so that means that you have a more kind of extreme, more people. I think has this. I read a statistic the other day. Like now, it's like the average American is thinking about politics for like 3 minutes a month or something like that. And I don't think that's a good thing, but I think it means that the kind of political parties move further away from the median American lens on the world. I think we've sort of moved through a increasing sort of crisis cycle, you know, and animating policy based on whatever is the perceived national, you know, or global crisis at the time. And it's exhausting for people. And I think it's a difficult place to build a deliberative democracy. And so, you know, that's part of why I do these town halls and why I spend so much time going out and trying to get on shop floors and visit small businesses and visit, you know, shop classes and things, places where I can try to, anyway, engage more on like what is the median experience here? What are the median like values and priorities, and not ones that are through a particularly partisan lens. You know, and I think you know, on the SAVE Act in particular, you know, people really believe, like, and I believe that citizenship confers different duties and rights. Like voting is for citizens, and reflecting that, you know, there are some pretty bad clauses in the bill, but one thing that is really underreported is that it also contained an attestation clause. You could risk perjuring yourself and saying, I am a US citizen and I have the right to vote, and sign a clause, you know, sign a statement, and those other clauses would not be applicable about, you know, whatever your last name, not passion, or whatever you know, your married name. And so at its core, you know, reflecting that sentiment that elections are important, that voting matters, and you know, it is true. It's technically accurate that non-citizen voting has not influenced the outcome of elections. That is technically accurate, but I think it can also miss the deeper sentiment that people have, that it doesn't matter what the absolute number is. It matters that elections are secure and determined by outcome by citizens. And so preserving and advancing confidence in our election systems is really important to me. And actually, the first bill I introduced was the Electoral Reform Commission, because I think like elections really do matter, that we have secure. I'm very concerned about the president's recent executive order about ballots being received by the election office on election day. I think there were 250,000 Washingtonians whose ballots were received after election day, but postmarked on election day. I really believe in paper ballots. You know, they're the gold standard in election security. You know, we have a really strong system, but it's also important that we are clear about who it is voting in these elections, and that this system, like, we're going to fight to preserve the integrity of the system at every level that we can, whether it's these questions of gerrymandering or, I mean, I think that is one of the more real risks. Like, this is not a Biden plus 20 or a Trump plus 20 country, but a lot of seats in Congress are cast that way. And so trying to find a way to have more Americans have more of a say in driving policy that's not determined by partisan interests.
Okay.
Well,
How's the crime level in DC? And what's the mood like there right now?
so is it truly a nightmare of murder and crime overrun by tent squalor, filth, and crime?
So I should preface with, like, when I'm in DC, I'm there in a 3-block radius. Like, I am not hanging out in DC, you know. So my lens is more limited. You know, we did have a colleague carjacked. But I think it's a unique situation because it's not a state, and you know, the deployment of National Guard. I mean, that's a totally different, you know, like, legal situation. I think my interest is that law enforcement is not scapegoated or used for political theater, and that our limited federal resources, our tax dollars, are being spent responsibly and not, you know, to animate a you know, sideshow in political theater.
Do you think in this case the National Guard is being used for political theater?
I mean, it's a concern. It's a concern. And I think you know, like, in a lot of cases, you know, with homelessness, it's like, or with crime, it's like actually resolving the issue is it's much longer work. It's not done just through enforcement. You have to ask yourself, why is this happening, you know, at a structural level in our culture? Like, why do people have fewer avenues for getting what they want out of life and less incentive to, like, use drugs or, you know, to crime their way into a better living situation? But that's longer work, and there's not a shortcut around, you know, rebuilding a stable middle class and a resilient economy.
Ben?
Yeah, what is the most frustrating example you've personally witnessed while in Congress?
Ooh. That's a good question. You know, I remember, you know, after, I don't know if this is quite your question, but I remember after the morning after the debate, the last November, like, people were crying in the cloakroom. Like, there was, like, a very deep seriousness that people seemed to have this, like, clarity. And it felt like it took 24 hours, maybe less, for the wagons to start circling, you know? It's like there's, like, a carried interest to power and influence, and, like, I guess it feels like it's maybe like a loss aversion or risk aversion. That's like, you know, you weight what you might lose heavier than how you could get a better situation. And I think that kind of misplaced loyalty to like a person and not your community, the loyalty to the soil, like that's the deeper thing here that we want. That's, I mean, that is a problem. That is a frustration. It can feel like people, you know, I get maybe similarly with like when they try to have pay raises for members of Congress, that maybe so much. And hearing the debates on that like, oh, like, just send your kids to public school, like buy a used car. You should live in the same economic reality. Like, how can you try to direct an economy that you're not a part of? Like, there are a lot of patriots who would do this job. You should not be here for personal enrichment. Some of the debates around, you know, moving policy around trading stocks, like, drives me crazy. Okay, granted, I had like $5,000 in stocks when I was elected, but like I sold them all. You know, like what? Like, we have been given so much in this country. Like, we have people, like we have good farmland. Like we have water. You know, we have heritage, and like you're gonna to see people like think that like to kind of orient things around a bank account and not like what is really worth having. And that's hard to see. And I'm not maligning, like there are a lot of really great members. There are a lot of real patriots who are I'm not trying to disparage, you know, the body. But that's been a little frustrating.
And the administration has not been shy about redirecting funding or halting funding approved by Congress. Do you have any concerns that that will impact the I-5 bridge?
Not at this point. I think, you know, when it's discussed in terms of protecting the power of the purse, I think that really obscures the real part of the issue. Like, it is about it's about the Constitution. Like Congress has the ability to.
Do you feel the administration has violated the Constitution in that regard?
They're certainly on the cusp of it. I mean, they're using rescissions. You know, they've got a majority in the House and the Senate. They're able to use rescissions. The discussion around what they're calling pocket rescissions really sets my teeth on edge. Like that, like this is.
And define that.
They're saying that they can do it as long as they keep it. My understanding, you know, in first term appropriator, but they're saying as long as they keep the top line within, it doesn't matter if they move the programmatic funding around. And so as long as that it doesn't require rescission to move within the top line of the budget allocation for like Ledge Branch or CJS or any of those things. So that's kind of the brainchild of West Code.
Is there any chance of Republicans in the House pushing back against
I
that?
did notice there's a new plaque on the dais about Article 1 of the Constitution, power of the purse. I didn't notice there's a new plaque about which was interesting. I will note it was made out of styrofoam. But I think there's a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues who, you know, swore up down sideways that they would never cut Medicare or Medicaid, got rolled like a cheap hot dog. Like it was pretty frustrating. And I think for me, to see a budget process that is oriented around, you know, taking stuff from the bottom 10%, giving stuff to the top 1%, like trying to run an economy when your policy is focused around 11% of the population is not gonna work. That's not a good idea. Like, it saddled the middle class with an additional $4 trillion of debt. You know, and I heard somebody say, well, we just need to educate people about the national debt and debt. And I was like, actually, I think working people pretty bitterly understand the reality of debt. I think there's people here who have not had to suffer under, their compounding interest on their credit cards. And, one thing is that, the way that those trade imbalances are spread often is things like, they call it, foreign investment in our assets there, but it's like selling off mineral rights, it's selling off factories. It is cutting off your nose to spite your face. It's not a good position for our country to be in. And for what? Like I'm literally having schools shut down. So
So talk a little more about the direct impact on the third district of the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
One of your declared opponents for next year, John Braun, who's a state senator and a Republican, he and some other Republicans in the state are saying, people just need to settle down. When the fallout is all done, this is going to be great for everybody. It's going to work. It's going to tell us what you see happening to the third district.
well, I'm already hearing from rural hospitals, about their impacts and that places that budget on a longer cycle. There's definitely concerns in nursing homes. There's, I think one of the slimiest parts of the bill is that most of those Medicaid cuts don't hit until December of 2027. So they've tried to, obscure what they're doing here until after the cake is baked of the next election cycle. It's like, if you're proud of what you're doing, why are you hiding it? That's and I recently watched them defund the Government Accountability Office. The GAO is one of the best investments you can make for rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. We do I'm all in on that. We want efficiency in the way that our limited tax dollars are being spent. Like, I want to ensure that resources are being spent on people who really need them and not out of convenience, but just like real necessity. But the way that this is being pursued is not kinds of structural reform that would lead to real long-term efficiency and effectiveness. Like, even though even the orientation around the Department of Government Efficiency, efficiency is a different question than effectiveness. You can very efficiently drive your car into a ditch. That can be done efficiently. Is it an effective way to hold wealth and to be a responsible citizen? That's a different question. And I think we need to have a deeper discussion about what we're pointed towards, what we want as a nation. It's like that deliberative democracy, not a slick PR campaign, but actually having time to sit down and talk with your neighbors at the dump and take your drop off. That's, I think, the real fabric of democracy, where we can have these discussions about what we want our government to do. What is it pointed towards? Not just efficiently driving into a ditch, but effectively operating machine.
Um, how's your frustration level right now? And just looking in the couple of years behind and then seeing what's to come, how are you dealing with all that?
Well, have you heard the saying, expectations are resentment under construction? Like, I think I had a kind of, I did not expect it to be an easy job or to be a, well-functioning, well-oiled machine at the time, but, I think, this Congress, the first week, I didn't have a 2 week period where I wasn't in DC, for like, I want to say like 6 months. Like, it was a really long time of not being able to be in my community and talking to my constituents, and that is part of what is so good about being back this August and being able to talk to people. And like, there are so many patriots here. Like, there are so many people that are spending their lives making sure that we have clean drinking water and taking care of the neighbors, and trying to steward a craft or a trade. And like, that is really refreshing. That is what I try to sort of focus on. Like, I think if you think about too much how things are broken, like they say that they train, the way that they train people to find counterfeit currency is they really look at the real thing. The real thing. It's like focusing on the good thing and what you want is that is what points you towards what is counterfeit and not productive. And so I'm not, I'm definitely frustrated. I'm definitely, I see some real damage happening, but you also have to stay oriented on what is good and what you really want and what is worth fighting for. Or you'll just get in this swirly.
Right. So what are you excited about coming up?
Well, I think permitting reform is that is a really necessary tool here, especially as we're seeing, more limited federal resources. I was talking to Portage Chinook, and they told me they anticipated that 40% of the cost of their dredging project would be permitting, and really trying to rebalance the work boots to spreadsheets kind of equation to focus on implementation, do what we want, and not just a system of like CYA, that's exciting. I have been finding more traction with the sort of my amendment on cognitive decline. I'm finding some more partners on our situation with sea lions. That's another, I heard the other day that there's now sea lions that are riding on barges through the locks. Just wild. And we have a lot of really smart, patriotic people in this country. It's easy to talk about what's going wrong, and a lot is, but I think, I was encouraged by the passage of the Halt Fentanyl Act that got signed into law recently. More resources on interdiction and multi-jurisdictional task forces. I think, finding more kind of coalitions, like, when I went and I held a round table at Clark County Detention Center, their jail, and the life, I think the life expectancy of a corrections officer is like 58 years old. They have their suicide rate is off the charts. And one of the things that I learned there was that, the officers who have been there longer, they're like, there's a direct line between when they shut down beds at Western State Hospital and our prison population change. And we never used to have schizophrenics, never used to get ejaculated on, like all of these things, like the suicide attempts in jail, like all these things. And that was part of the reason I brought a corrections officer as my guest to the State of the Union, to say, like, if you're not gonna listen to the people that are suffering from these cuts, like, we listen to law enforcement who's left holding the bag, because these are real impacts, and they can tell you in quite concrete terms that this is not an abstract policy question. So trying to like find and exercise, and it's like, who has like a mouth to speak and who has a ton, ears to hear, and trying to find these unexercised, partnerships,
So go back, policy question. Where do you stand regarding foreign aid for Israel and America's support of Israeli policy in Gaza?
Well, I think I'm not gonna carry water for Netanyahu, and I think there's sort of a couple of questions of like, what is the long-term strategic interest of peace, and like, how can that be pursued? Like, I think the Middle East is a safer place when there's a liberal democracy left standing. And I think it's important that we stand with our allies, and that doesn't mean, endorsing everything, but, that they have a right to a safe place to live. And I believe in a two-state solution. But I think that having I mean, I still believe like the fastest way for this war to end is for the hostages to be released. Pretty.
So should the US continue supplying weapons to Israel that are being used in the Gaza Strip?
I think one of the things that we've seen and learned out of Ukraine is that our ability to are just the machine, like the facilities to manufacture the stuff matter. Like it matters that you're able to have this capacity. And I think that we should continue to stand with Israel. I think that is in national and in our geopolitical interest, and in the interest of longer term security, for there to be a liberal democracy in the Middle East. I don't think we're going to see that from another nation. It's the best shot.
Is there not a middle ground there from like US foreign policy to apply more pressure to support Israel as a democracy, but still apply pressure on its leadership to try to bring this thing to an end?
Essentially, I mean, I think people are more willing to listen to allies than to, adversaries. I also think that, like, I'm not an expert on this. And even the experts don't agree. I think trying to listen to as many positions as I can, figure out what's in the durable interest of our community. That's, there has been turmoil in the Middle East. forever. And it's the, I'm not, you know, I didn't run to represent Southwest Washington with the expectation that would single-handedly achieve peace in the Middle East. Like it's going to take, it's going to take, well, who knows what it's going to take, right? This is a big question.
Is there anything significant we've not asked about, that's top of your mind?
I guess I'd like to talk a little bit more about the, my amendment on cognitive mind. So just want to clarify that, so my amendment was really simple. It directs the Office of Congressional Conduct to develop a standard with which to with that ethics committee can use to evaluate whether a member can execute the duties of their office unimpeded by significant, irreversible, two important words, cognitive decline. So it's not, you know, somebody got a concussion and then, you know, it's durable and it's significant. Part of what's, you know, so I will say, I was thinking about some of the news articles I'd read and some of the questions I've been getting back home and things I've been hearing from my community, you know, this idea that Congress is run by unelected staffers and members, you know, it's not actually the elected calling the shots. And, you know, I've been sitting in appropriations markup for 18 hours a day looking at a portrait of Kay Granger, the former chair who was found living in a Alzheimer's care facility while a sitting member of the committee, not having voted for 8 months. And, you know, confidence in Congress' ability and in that the elected themselves calling the shots and not their staff, but that is pivotal to our democratic system working. So I was looking at the ethics code. There's nothing in the ethics code about how to make this determination. If one of those staffers had tried to make an ethics claim, there would be no nonpartisan, transparent way to make an evaluation about that. An ethics committee is really different than every other committee in Congress. It's not controlled by the majority. It's always a 50-50 split. And, you know, my amendment doesn't change the Constitution. Ethics committee does not have power to remove a member from office. The Constitution is very clear. It's only 3 ways you can lose your seat. You can die, you can lose your election, or you can have 2/3 of the body vote to remove you. And like, you cannot get 2/3 of the body to agree with the sky is blue. Like, this power to remove a member with a 2/3 majority has existed for the entirety of Congress, and it has not been weaponized. And it's a little bit of that risk aversion where it's like, right now, we have a crisis of confidence in the body. And there's a lot of news articles, but it's not about an individual member of Congress. It is about a systemic failure to develop standards for the body to hold itself to a standard that every small business in this country faces. Every farm has this discussion about, you know, who's got the keys when. And this body can't be a part of running a country if it's not going to hold itself to that same standard. You can't be exempt in these special ways. We can't have more loyalty to a colleague than to our constituents. And, you know, ensuring that voters have more information to make a determination about who they want to vote for, I think that's a good thing. You know, and I'll also say that the ethics committee would have had to vote to their findings are they have to vote to make them public. Their reports are not public either. So they would have to have a bipartisan group vote that there was the issue with cognitive decline, and then they would also have to vote to make that finding public. And then somebody else would have to introduce something for the full body to vote on any kind of you know, removal question. So
And so this would only apply to Congress, not to the executive.
the executive has the mechanisms for their administration, and actually there exist mechanisms in the judicial as well. And so in a lot of ways, this just brings more parity into the House of saying that we are also going to develop a transparent, nonpartisan system to make these evaluations. So
Do you have any concern that it could become weaponized?
That the power of removal is static. It's not changing one way or the other based on this amendment. I think what my amendment does is bring more transparency and just a clear vehicle. And, I didn't make a recommendation. I didn't make a statement about what that standard would be. I've heard there's been, hypothesis that the cognitive tests that are used in the executive or something similar to MOCA, which is they're really straightforward. It's like, it shows them, an analog clock and it says, like, what time is it? Tell me what time the clock says. It's like, I'm going to give you a list of 5 words. Repeat them back to me. This is not about weeding out kooky ideas. This should be difficult to exercise. It should be, so no, I don't think that this is going to be easily, I don't see this being weaponized.
Anything else?
What do you see as the future of the Democratic Party? And in your opinion, how would you swing the pendulum back toward the Democrats?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a party strategist, but I can say that from my vantage point, single party control of rural America has not been a good thing for us. And it is a good thing for any political party to really listen to people who are making things and building things and growing things in this country. There's a deeper sort of checkpoint on like reality of that, it's like an extrinsic reality. And I think, a real loyalty to and confidence in people's ability to like make good decisions. It's, you're not going to legislate quality of care. I think, our state, I think that the state's manual for childcare centers is, I think I've heard it's like 800 pages long, hadn't been printed in 6 years because it changes too frequently. And my hope is that our party, recognizes that you do not get good legislation if you don't have people who've actually done the job at the table. That like you need to have people who have turned wrenches and driven trucks and changed diapers at the table when you're building policy, and that it's, I think a lot about like localism, not in the sense of portrayal politics, like what can I get from my country, my county or whatever, but in the sense of like when we all show up loyal not to the commodification of the idea, not primarily as a, it's not primarily as an environmentalist, but as someone who loves the woods, who loves the Gifford Pinchot National Forest and has a specific picture in mind of what that thing is, not the, modification of that value or globalization of that value, but the thing itself. If you could get 435 members of Congress to show up local, that local lens, what shines through all of those views is good federal policy. And it's a more intimate relationship with like the interests and not a national checklist of, all Democrats are going to care about these 10 things, and all Republicans are going to care about these 10 things. But by caring deeply about what your community cares about, you can arrive at a better federal policy and point to some of these bigger issues. Like, it's so funny on headlights. It's like everybody thinks it's just them who thinks they're too bright, because you're usually driving. People are driving alone a lot, and it's when you start to talk about these, these issues that you discover a broader shared interest and like, a group of people to work with and animate a more useful and necessary set of priorities. So, yeah, that's, I think it's so many of us agree about so much, and, you know, we get hung up on these issues that weren't really what we started out caring about, and it becomes the thing. And it's like, we endlessly debate healthcare and health insurance, and we're not talking about just health. Like the precursors of health, where it's like, you're getting 8 hours of sleep a night, and we're seeing your kids at night, like you're able to coach Little League, like you're able to eat real food, like these things that can be a bigger shared agenda, you know, but we get talking about, you know, like nobody likes insurance. Like it's like, you don't want to have to use your insurance, you know, policy that's all the oxygen's taking up talking about what we don't like and not what we think is worth having. We get spinning our wheels. So, I think, yeah, I think maybe that's not necessarily a partisan answer, but I would like to see happen generally in politics.
Right, well, Marie, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you.
for coming.